Small sneakers by the front door. Not hers. Not his. Child-sized chopsticks in the dish rack. A handprint on the hallway mirror. Too low to belong to either of them. And a locked door. A locked door he begged her, with actual desperation in his eyes, never to open. She told herself there was an explanation. She told herself she was overthinking. She told herself that the man who held her hand in his sleep and called her mother on her birthday and learned her coffee order after the first date, that man was not hiding something from her. She told herself that for 3 months, right up until the Tuesday afternoon she came home early, right up until she heard a small cough from behind that door, right up until she turned the handle. But before we get to what was behind that door, where are you watching this from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments. And if stories like this one are the reason you keep coming back, make sure you're subscribed, because this channel exists for people who believe the most powerful stories are the ones that feel completely real. Now, back to Linda. What she found on the other side didn't just change her relationship. It changed how she understood love entirely. Because love, she learned, isn't always announced. Sometimes it's hiding behind a locked door, keeping itself small, waiting for someone brave enough to walk in. And the part that will stay with you isn't the secret. It's the one word spoken at the end of it. Linda had a specific way of knowing when something was wrong. Not an instinct exactly, more like a calibration. She had grown up in a Lagos household where nothing was ever said directly, and everything was communicated through the precise angle of her mother's shoulders. The particular silence that followed a question nobody wanted to answer, the way her aunties laughed just a little too loudly when someone's husband walked into the room. She had learned early that the surface of things and the truth of things were rarely the same conversation. So when something shifted in Taehyung that October, she noticed in the way she had been trained her whole life to notice, quietly, carefully, without showing her hand. And they had been together for 8 months. 8 months that had felt, for most of their duration, like the easiest thing Linda had ever done. Taehyung was not a complicated man on the surface. He was punctual and gentle and laughed at her jokes a half-second before anyone else in the room did. He made her Nigerian soup once with the wrong peppers and presented it with such genuine pride that she ate the entire bowl and said nothing. Would be given anything she didn't first fight for, had let herself receive him. Which is why October frightened her. It started with the phone. Taehyung had never been precious about his phone. He left it face up on tables, handed it to her to change songs when he was driving. Fell asleep with it on the pillow between them, like an afterthought. Then, one evening in early October, she reached for it to show him a restaurant, and he picked it up first. Faster than was natural. He smiled while he did it. The smile was the tell. It was one beat too wide, assembled rather than arrived at. She said nothing. She filed it. The call started a week later. He began stepping outside to take them. Not hurrying exactly, but moving with a kind of deliberate casualness that she recognized as performance. He would return composed. He would say work. He said it the way people say fine when you ask how they are, reflexively, without content. Then came the lock. One Saturday morning, she reached for the handle of the second bedroom, a room that had always been used loosely for storage for his guitar that he never played, for boxes that had never been fully unpacked, and the handle did not turn. She stood there for a moment. She turned to him. He was in the kitchen with his back to her, and she watched the back of his neck go still in the particular way that a body goes still when it is pretending not to be listening. She asked him about it later, lightly, the way you ask about something that should have a light answer. He said he'd put a few things in there he didn't want disturbed. He said it carefully. He held eye contact the way someone holds eye contact when they have practiced doing so. She nodded. She said, "Okay." She went to bed and lay in the dark and listened to the apartment breathe. If you have ever loved someone and felt the first cold edge of a secret between you, you already know what Linda felt in those weeks. It is not dramatic. It is not loud. It is very quiet and very persistent, like a sound just below hearing that you feel in your back teeth. She went to work. She came home. She cooked and laughed and sat beside him on the couch and felt the distance growing in millimeters, invisible to everyone but her. She started noticing other things. The small sneakers appeared on a Thursday, neat, white, a child's size, placed by the front door with the same careful alignment that Tae-hyung used for his own shoes. She picked one up. She turned it over. She set it back down precisely as she had found it and walked to the kitchen and drank a full glass of water standing at the sink. The chopsticks followed. Child-sized, red-handled, in the dish rack on a morning when she came down early and Tae-hyung was already showered and standing at the stove with his back to her. She looked at the chopsticks. She looked at his back. She sat down at the table. She said good morning. He said good morning. They had breakfast, and neither of them said anything about the chopsticks. This is what Linda understood about secrets, and what Tae-hyung did not yet understand about her, that she was never going to confront him in the middle of the deception. She was going to wait. She came from a lineage of women who waited. Women who assembled the full picture before they spoke, because speaking too early only gave the other person time to construct a better lie. She was going to know everything before she said anything. But she was not without feeling, and the feeling was a specific grinding grief, not yet the grief of confirmed betrayal, but the grief of watching someone you love choose to be alone rather than let you in. He was working 2 jobs. She knew this before she was supposed to know. She had found a pay stub from a convenience store, a night shift, folded inside a jacket pocket when she was taking it to the dry cleaner. She had photographed it and put it back. And she had thought about it every day since. A man working 2 jobs and hiding both the reason and the exhaustion. Who does that? What kind of weight makes a person do that? She watched him sleep sometimes and thought, "Where are you? You are right here and I cannot find you anywhere." And then there was the handprint. She found it on a Wednesday evening, low on the hallway mirror, the perfect pressed outline of a small hand. She stood in front of it for a long time. The apartment was quiet. Tae-hyung was on the phone in the bathroom with the water running. She pressed her own hand against the mirror beside the small print and looked at the difference in size. A child had been in this apartment, a child who ate with small red chopsticks and wore white sneakers and pressed their hand against mirrors the way all children do. Not to hide themselves, but because glass is fascinating, and they have not yet learned to worry about what they leave behind. She stepped back from the mirror, and from somewhere, faint, easily missable, the kind of sound you could dismiss if you needed to, she heard something behind the locked door, a cartoon, barely audible, and underneath it, or behind it, the quiet, specific sound of someone trying to be very still. She stood in the hallway and did not move. From the bathroom, the water shut off. She walked to the kitchen. She put the kettle on, and he looked at her for a moment with an 100% confidence. She said, "Just tired." He looked at her for a moment with an expression she couldn't fully read, something that lived between relief and sorrow, the face of a man who has just been given more time he knows he doesn't deserve. He said, "I love you." She said, "I know." She did not say it back, not because she didn't mean it, but because something in her needs to hold it back just for now, the way you hold something precious close to your body when the ground beneath you is uncertain. She gave it 1 more week. She told herself, 1 more week, and then she was walking out of this apartment and not coming back until she understood what she was walking back into. She lasted 4 days. The Tuesday she came home early was not planned. Her afternoon meeting was canceled, as she took the train home at 2 in the afternoon instead of 6. She did not text him. She did not think very much about what she was doing or why. She simply came home. The apartment felt different the moment she opened the door. Warmer, more inhabited. The air had a quality that apartments get when someone has been living inside them fully rather than passing through. The faint smell of a recent meal, a television turned low. Then she heard it, a small cough, from behind the locked door. She stood completely still. She counted her own heartbeats. She looked at the door. She thought about everything she had filed away over 3 months. The sneakers, the chopsticks, the handprint, the cartoon, the pay stub, the midnight phone calls, the smile assembled 1 beat too late. She thought about the way he looked at her sometimes like he was memorizing her. She thought about the night she found him sitting in the dark with his face in his hands. She walked to the door. She put her hand on the handle. She turned it. The door opened. The boy was sitting cross-legged on a mattress on the floor. Korean, around 7 years old, small and slight with dark, serious eyes that found her immediately and did not look away. Around him, books, as a worn, stuffed bear missing one eye, and drawings, dozens of them, taped carefully to every wall. She looked at the drawings without meaning to. Children at tables, a tall woman in a yellow dress, a man with his arms around a small figure, a house with all its windows lit. She looked at the boy. He looked at her. He did not move. He did not make a sound. But he had the expression of someone who had been waiting for this moment long enough that the fear of it had mostly been replaced by a tired kind of resignation. She heard the front door open behind her. Fast footsteps. Tae-hyung appeared in the doorway. She turned to look at him. His face. She would think about his face for a long time afterward. It was not the face of someone caught in a lie. It was the face of someone watching the thing they had been most terrified of finally arrive. As resigned, hollowed out. And underneath all of that, something she had not expected at all. Relief. Like a man who has been holding his breath for 2 years and has finally, involuntarily, exhaled. "I was going to tell you," he said. She looked at him. He said it again, quieter. "I was going to tell you." She looked back at the boy. The boy had not moved. His eyes went between the two of them with a careful and practiced attention, the attention of a child who has learned to read rooms quickly, who knows that adults in tension are a weather system that must be monitored. "What is his name?" Linda asked. "Junho," Tae-hyung responded. "How old?" Linda questioned, her eyes flashing between the boy and Tae-hyung. 7. He will be 8 in March. She stepped back from the doorway. She walked to the kitchen. She sat down at the table. After a moment, Tae-hyung followed. He sat across from her. The apartment was quiet except for the faint sound of the television in the other room, still playing cartoons at low volume for a boy who was almost certainly no longer watching them. "Tell me everything," Linda said. And he did. His parents had died 2 years ago. Black ice on a highway outside Seoul, coming home from a family dinner on a Saturday night. Tae-hyung had been 24. Junho had been 5. There was no other family. His parents had both been only children. His grandparents long gone. The state had looked at Tae-hyung, 24 years old, and recently arrived in a new country, and presented him with a choice that was not really a choice at all. He became Junho's legal guardian 11 days after the funeral. He did not tell Linda this because by the time they met, he had already been alone with it for a year, and that had calcified into something he could no longer see past. Then he had built a life in 2 separate rooms. The room where he was a man in love with a woman who made everything feel possible, and the room where he was a 26-year-old holding together the broken pieces of a 5-year-old who had not spoken a single word since the night of the accident. He had kept those rooms locked from each other because he did not know what happened if they opened into the same space. He did not know if she would stay. He did not think he would survive finding out that she wouldn't. "There was a social worker," he told her. "There had been a report 3 months ago. A neighbor had mentioned to someone that she rarely saw the child outside. The state had sent someone to evaluate his living conditions. He had 45 days to demonstrate stability or risk losing guardianship. He was working 2 jobs to cover rent, school fees, a winter coat, a doctor's appointment he'd been putting off because the appointment cost more than he'd told himself he could spend. He had a list on his phone. She had seen it. He knew she had seen it. He had said nothing. She listened to all of this without interrupting. When he finished, the apartment was very quiet. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she asked, "Does he eat enough?" Tae-hyung put his face in his hands. His shoulders began to shake, slowly at first, and then with the full force of something that had been contained for 2 years in a body that was never designed to contain it. He didn't make much sound. The crying was almost silent, which made it worse somehow. The crying of someone who has learned to do even grief quietly, so that a small boy in the next room doesn't hear it and becomes afraid. She did not touch him yet. She sat with him in it. Because she was her mother's daughter, and she knew that some moments are not for managing. They are for witnessing. And the most loving thing you can do for a person who has been invisible for too long is to simply stay in the room and let them be seen. She did not move in that night. She went home. She sat on her own bed and called her friend Amara and said, "I don't even know where to start explaining this." And Amara, and who had known Linda since secondary school and understood her silences better than most people understood her words, said simply, "Is he a good man?" And Linda was quiet for a moment. And then she said yes. And Amara said, "Then you already know what you're going to do." She came back the next morning with groceries. She didn't make an announcement. She didn't have a speech. And she walked into the kitchen and started making breakfast, and Tae-hyung stood in the doorway watching her with an expression she didn't have a word for yet. Junho watched from the hallway. She did not call him over, did not make eye contact, did not perform warmth in his direction. She cooked like he wasn't there, like there was simply no pressure attached to his presence in any direction. She set 3 plates. She sat down. She started eating. The silence stretched. Then small footsteps. The Yuno sat down across from her. He watched her eat for a moment. Then he picked up his chopsticks. The days that followed were made of small things. She learned he communicated in drawings. He would leave them in places she would find them, the way some children leave notes. She started leaving blank paper and new pens on the kitchen table without comment. One morning she moved his shoes neatly by the door, and the next day found her own shoes moved neatly beside his. She narrated what she was doing when she was in the kitchen. "I'm making ramyeon. It'll be ready in 10 minutes. She said, not expecting a response, just letting her voice become familiar to him, like a sound that means safe rather than a sound that means brace yourself. One afternoon she fell asleep on the couch reading. She woke up with a blanket over her. She looked at Tae-hyung across the room. He shook his head slowly. They both looked at the hallway. There was one evening she almost left. She was watching Tae-hyung fall asleep at the kitchen table again, still in his work clothes, head dropping forward, fighting it the way exhausted people fight sleep when they believe they don't have the right to it yet. And Junho was in the other room, and the apartment felt held together with love and not enough of everything else. And she stepped outside and stood in the cold and called Amara again. "Oh, tell me I'm not crazy for staying." "Does it feel real?" Amara asked. Linda looked up at the lit window of the apartment, then answered, "It feels like the realest thing I've ever walked into." Then she went back inside. "If this story is already doing something to you, if you are feeling something you don't entirely have a name for yet, you are exactly where this story needs you to be. Stay with it, because what comes next is the part that matters." It was an ordinary evening. On no special occasion, no dramatic setup. The kitchen smelled like ramyeon. Tae-hyung was in the shower. Linda was washing dishes. Junho was at the kitchen table doing homework, head bent over his notebook, pencil moving. She was humming, something low and absent, a song her mother used to sing while cooking. One of those melodies that lives so deep in the body you don't notice you're making it. She turned off the tap, dried her hands, turned around. Jun-ho had stopped writing, and he was looking at her. Not the careful, monitoring look she had come to know, the one that assessed exits and emotional temperatures. Something different, something that had reached a decision. He opened his mouth. The word came out soft, careful, like a person testing weight on ice before committing a full step. Nuna. She went completely still. From the hallway, Tae-hyung appeared in the bathroom doorway. Wet hair, towel, frozen in place. He had heard it. Ayunyo looked between them both with the absolute composure of a child who has just done something enormous and chosen to treat it as ordinary. He looked back down at his homework. He picked up his pencil. He continued writing, like he hadn't just spoken for the first time in 2 years, like he had simply decided, quietly, privately, entirely on his own terms, that she was safe enough to name. Linda turned back to the sink. She gripped the edge of it. Her shoulders shook once. She breathed. Behind her, she heard Tae-hyung slide down the wall and sit on the floor. She heard him crying, real crying, the kind that has been stored in the body so long it comes out with physical force, the kind that has no performance in it because there is no longer any reason to perform. She stayed at the sink. She let him have it, because she understood now what the locked room had actually been holding. Not a secret, not a deception in the way she had feared. A man who loved 2 people and believed, with everything in him, that he was not allowed to ask for help carrying either one. He didn't think he deserved love while holding so much weight. Jun-ho had just told him otherwise. One word spoken to her, meaning, I see you, meaning, you are mine now too, meaning, stay. The 3 of them stayed in that kitchen for a long time. Tae-hyung on the floor, Linda at the sink, Jun-ho at the table, pencil moving, so adding something to his drawing that she would find, later on, the refrigerator. 3 figures in a kitchen, a window behind them full of light, every detail exact. He had drawn it before she even turned around. He had known before either of them did. If you made it to the end of this story, share it with someone who needs to hear it tonight. And if this kind of storytelling moves you, the kind that hides its truth in plain sight, the kind where the secret is never the point, subscribe. Because every story on this channel is built exactly like this one. A locked door, a reason you didn't expect, and somewhere inside it, one small, quiet, devastating word that changes everything.